Over the years, many Native American girls and women have gone missing or murdered throughout the United States and Canada. There is a widespread anger and sadness that grows in the families and communities of the loved ones who are missing. Missing and murdered Indigenous women is yet another trauma for Native Americans that adds up to the existing wounds many had to experience over the years. To make this a little more clear, I will give you some statistics. The National Crime Information Center reports that in 2016 there were 5,712 reports of missing Native American women and girls. However, only 116 cases were logged in the U.S. Department of Justice Federal Missing Person Database. The probability of Indigenous women to be murdered is 10 times higher than for all other ethnicities. Murder is the third leading cause of death for Indigenous women, and more than 4 out of 5 Indigenous women have experienced violence, namely 84% of Native women. More than half of Indigenous women have been physically abused once or more times by their intimate partners, in numbers 55.5%. More than half of Indigenous women experience sexual violence at least once in their lifetime, and less than half of Indigenous women have been stalked in their lifetime. Indigenous women are 1.7 times more likely than Anglo-American women to experience violence. Indigenous women are 2 times more likely to be raped than Anglo-American white women. The murder rate of Indigenous women is 3 times higher than that for Anglo-American women. And these are very disheartening statistics, especially for Native women. Coming to the topic of media coverage that is provided for missing and murdered Indigenous women, media coverage is generally low and restricted to local news. Mostly only the most necessary facts of what a missing person was wearing, when and where she was last seen, and with whom are shared in the media news reports. This is also the case for Mary Johnson, who went missing in November 2020. She is an enrolled citizen of the Tulalip tribes and 39 years old. A Google search of her name turned up only about 6,000 results. She was last seen walking around Fire Trail Road in the reservation, but never made it to her destination. On the other hand, when Gabby Petito went missing and was ultimately found dead in 2021, there were over 340 million results on Google that were connected to her case. There was an immense and worldwide media outcry connected to this case, and the search for Gabby Petito involved the FBI, local police, and many voluntary people. The missing white woman syndrome is a phenomenon that describes the huge media and social media attention that appears with cases of missing white women. The vast outcry of followers and citizens urged authorities to take action. This actually has real-life implications for women of color. Why? This makes them less safe because perpetrators seek the victim that no one is going to look for. In Wyoming, the state in which Petito was found dead, a report released this year by Wyoming's Task Force on Missing and Murdered Indigenous Persons found over 700 Native American people went missing in the state alone between 2011 and 2020. When looking at the articles and social media posts online and comparing the two missing women's cases, one cannot help to notice the distinct difference. Mary Johnson's articles and reports are usually very short and concise and use non-emotional language such as estranged husband and biases like maybe she overdosed and passed away somewhere. Whereas Gabby Petito's case generated much more attention and introduced the interference of internet sleuths and detectives that explain and sensationalized every detail of her case in social media. Every picture that was published was analyzed by these people, and many speculations what might have happened circulated on the internet. In Gabby Petito's case, there was a lot of emotion involved. Her fans on social media felt personally involved, which is due to the fact that Petito shared every aspect of her life before. Words such as emotional, heartbreaking, abusive, threatening, manipulating are used to describe her boyfriend, who was accused at that time of killing her. The interest this sparked in social media can also be traced back to the identification that many young women must have had with Gabby Petito, a famous influencer. In an article, a young woman said, "We latched onto Gabby's story less because we saw ourselves in her and more because we saw our abusers in her partner." As I have shown, in direct comparison, unfortunately, in the cases of missing and murdered Indigenous women and also the one of Mary Johnson, who on a side note has not yet been found, are drastically underrepresented in media and do not gain the same amount of attention as cases of white women gone missing. Over time now, more and more light and attention is shed onto these cases. On the level of language and how these cases are represented on a linguistic basis, one can say that with more attention and more emotion and hatred come into play. There are proper fights on social media and shitstorms when it comes to opinions which include colloquial language. On the other hand, there are biased opinions of many authors that Native women either got too drunk, took drugs, or wanted to run away. As an incentive to spread more awareness for the missing and murdered Indigenous women, the National Day of Action and Awareness has been founded, where on this day activists and groups organize marches around the country to protest class disparity, racism, inequality, and violence against Native Americans. On the other hand, May 15th is the official Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women's Day. A red hand over the mouth has become the symbol of a growing movement, the Missing and Murdered Indigenous Women Movement. It stands for all the missing sisters whose voices are not heard. It stands for the silence of the media and law enforcement in the midst of this crisis. It stands for the oppression and subjugation of Native women who are now rising up to say, no more stolen sisters. Finally, since the matter is gaining more attention over time, in 2021 the Secretary of the Interior, Deb Haaland, announced the formation of the Missing and Murdered Unit that will focus on analyzing and solving missing and murdered Indigenous peoples' cases. This is a first step to help and solve all these cases. Yet this is a start to help and prevent the many Native American women and girls that have gone missing, have been murdered, and will likely experience some sort of aggressiveness and violence in their lives. There should not be a distinction in race and color between anyone that goes missing in any country, and we have to raise the awareness of this topic to help the many unfortunate people that had to suffer such a terrible fate.